So, welcome back to Managerial Accounting. Purpose of this little mini lecture is to review the results of the take-home part of the exam. So there were 6 questions, 33 through 38. Each one was worth 10 points. So if you look on the first page of your exam booklet, you'll see the number of points you scored for each question. What I would strongly encourage you to do when you have problems like this in exam number 3 or in other courses that you might have is before you try to digest all the data that's given, focus on the question. So determine the amount of janitorial department cost to be allocated to cafeteria, cutting, and assembly. So that's what we want here. And some of you took this problem further and then reallocated the cafeteria cost to the other 2 production departments, which was fine, but that wasn't the question. It was determine the amount of janitorial department cost to be allocated to cafeteria, cutting, and assembly. So in order to answer that question, notice what I've highlighted here. The total cost of the janitorial department are $150,000, and you're going to allocate those on the basis of the square feet. So janitorial costs should be allocated on the basis of square foot. And so when you do that, you take a look at the total square feet from each department. So notice janitorial, you're going to allocate the 150,000, and you're going to set up a ratio of 20,000, 44,000, and 16,000. And you're going to, that'll be the denominator, the number of square feet available in those 3 units that you're going to be allocating janitorial to. And then you are going to figure out the fraction that should be equated to each. So A, you want the cafeteria. So the cafeteria has 20,000 square feet. And this denominator remains the same throughout, which is the total of cafeteria, cutting, and assembly. So if you take 20,000, divide by the combined total there, I believe that's 40,000. That gives you 50%. 50% of 150 gives you 75. And in the case of the cutting department, they've only got 4,000 square feet. So 4,000 divided by the combined total of 24,006, again, that's 40,000. So that gives you 10%. 10% of 150,000 is 15,000. And then the last one here, it's 40%. How did I get that? Because it's 16,000 square feet divided by 40 gives you 40%. And then you multiply 40% times 150, and that's where your allocations come from. So if you took it further than that, if you went ahead and now tried to allocate the remaining costs of cafeteria to cutting and assembly. I didn't mark it wrong, but that's not what I asked you to do. All I wanted you to do was allocate the cost of the janitorial department to cafeteria, cutting, and assembly. So that's the first one. Get that all right, you get 10 points. The next one here, we wanted to using the net realizable value method. So you had to use net realizable value method. Now, some of you took the bait here and you allocated this on the basis of physical units, which was not what we wanted you to do. And so you could have taken you could have allocated this on the basis of physical units. You could have allocated this on the basis of market value, but they wanted us to do it on the basis of the net realizable value. Okay, and they told us the net realizable value for face cream was this amount, and they told us body lotion was this amount, and they told us liquid soap was this amount. So if you add those all up, it's 7,000. That's allocated on the basis of net realizable value. So face cream has 7,500. The body lotion has 3,500, and the liquid soap has 4,000. So there's your denominator throughout. And then you have to say, well, how much of that are we going to allocate? And the allocation is 7,500 is the amount of the face cream's value. So 7,500 divided by the total of the 3,500 plus the 7,500, 11, 12, 16,000. So 7,500 divided by the 16,000 times 200,000 gives you 150. And then the market value, net realizable value of the body lotion is 3,500 divided by the same fraction times 200,000 gives you 46. And then liquid soap, you know the net realizable value is 4 divided by the combined total of all the net realizable values times 200 gives you 54. So a little check on this, you should have added up all the net realizable values and make sure that the total, the combined amount of the net realizable value actually equals $200,000. So 100 plus 50, 46 plus 54 does indeed give us 200,000. So again, you wanted to allocate it on the basis of net realizable value, not on the basis of physical units. Remember, there are several different ways to allocate joint cost. Here, we wanted you to allocate on the basis of net realizable value. And you know from a previous problem that we did, a multiple choice problem, that net realizable value would be the sales price at split off minus the sales value at split off. So take the sales price multiplied by the number of units, subtract out any additional costs incurred after split off to make it available for sale. You didn't have to do that here because we actually told us what the net realizable value is. So number 3, this was a break-even analysis problem, but it was break-even cost volume profit analysis when the company sold more than one product. So you had to do 3 things. You had to do break-even in units, break-even in units in terms of the product S and product T, and then the number of products that we'd have to sell to each an operating income of 119,000. Now, a couple of you lost a point here because we wanted break even in units, and you started to give me these things in dollars. So we didn't want break even in sales dollars. We didn't want the dollar amount of units that we had to sell to reach our profit goal. We wanted the number of units. So first thing, A, the break even in terms of sales units. So what you have to do, since 60% of it's product S and 40% is product T, you have to prorate the sales prices. So you come up with a prorated sales price of 46. You have to prorate the market variable costs. So you have to prorate those, and you come up with a market variable cost of 36.80. So the composite contribution margin reflecting 60% product X and 40% product T, contribution margin is $9.20. So the break even, therefore, would be the total fixed cost of $202,400 divided by the contribution margin of $920. So you have to sell 22,000 units. So that's the number of units they have to sell. And now if you ask, well, okay, I know I need to sell 22,000 units overall, but if 60% of those are product S and 40% is product T, how do I get that? So you multiply 22,000 times 0.6 and you get 13,200. And you multiply 22,000 times 0.4 and you get 8,800. So that's the break even in terms of units of S and units of T. And then what is the total number of units we have to sell to reach an operating profit of 119? So that would be the fixed cost of 202,400 plus the 119,600 divided by the contribution margin of 920. So you have to sell 35,000. 36. So here you were given information and they want, this is the following, the data that's given, and they give us the breakdown, they give us the production. So I produced 50,000 units, but I only sold 42,000. So you know right off the bat, when they ask you to do the absorption costing is going to give you a higher net income than the variable costing, because anytime you have an increase in the inventory, when you produce more units than you make, absorption costing is going to give you a higher net income because your ending inventory is going to reflect a fixed cost. Whereas we know in variable costing that fixed costs are always considered a period cost. So here are the manufacturing costs. So they're broken down between variable and fixed. And here's the selling and administrative expenses, variable and fixed. So they want us to prepare an income statement using absorption costing and an income statement using variable costing. So most of you did real well on this question. Those of you who kind of lost your way because you forgot about the value of the ending inventory, particularly when it related to the variable costing. So first we got to use absorption costing. So this is what's required under generally accepted accounting principles. So to get the sales, you would have taken 42,000 times $18 a unit. That would have given us $756,000 worth of sales. They told us that the manufacturing costs, the total manufacturing costs were $655,000. So that's the cost of goods manufactured under absorption costing. Then you have to do the ending inventory. So to get the ending inventory, we knew that the number of units in ending inventory was 8,000 at the end of the period. So you had to come up with the value of the ending inventory. So you had total production cost of 655,000 and you manufactured 50,000 units. See up at the top here, 50,000 units. So 50,000 units divided by 8,000, divided by 50,000 units divided into total cost of production of 655. That gives us a unit cost, and you multiply that by 8,000, and you get 104,880. So there is my ending inventory under absorption costing. Then I get, so I take the cost of goods manufactured, subtract out the ending inventory. It gives us cost of goods sold, subtract that from sales, you get gross profit. Then you subtract out the total selling and administrative expenses, and you get the operating income of 160,300. So that is under absorption costing. That's the method that's required under generally accepted accounting principles. The thing you had to do there is you had to compute the value of the ending inventory, which was where some of you lost your way. Now, before we go any further and we do variable costing, we know we increased the inventory by 8,000 units. So we know that absorption costing is going to give us a higher net income than variable costing. Why? Because we have more, we increased the inventory, and the ending inventory includes fixed cost. That doesn't mean that you do not consider ending inventory for variable costing. What it means, however, is that for your ending inventory, you only consider the variable cost of manufacturing. So let's now take a look at the variable cost income statement. So sales remains the same, but the variable cost of goods sold, they had told us up above, was 575,000. So those are the variable costs of goods sold. Okay, the variable cost of goods sold is 575,000, but you still have to consider the ending inventory. So the ending inventory, I came up with 920,000. And so you take 557,000, which is the variable cost of goods manufactured, divided by 50,000 times 8,000. So that gives us 92 as the value of the ending inventory. So my variable cost of goods sold is not 575 because you had to consider the value of the ending inventory is 92,000. So my variable cost of goods sold is 483,000. Then it's sales minus variable cost of goods sold gives us the variable, gives us the what we call the manufacturing margin. From that, you have to subtract out the variable selling and administrative expenses. That gives us our contribution margin. Then you have to subtract out the total fixed costs of manufacturing, which was you had fixed manufacturing costs of 80,000, and you had selling and administrative fixed costs of 10,500. So there is your total fixed costs of in terms of additional fixed costs, which were all period costs. So your operating income is 147,500, which is less than what you got under absorption costing. And the reason it is less is because you actually manufactured more units than you sold. And if you manufacture more units than you sold, absorption costing gives you a higher net income than variable, which is we saw that impact here. Okay, next one is to do the budget for cost of goods sold, and I have to say you folks did real well on this. We spent a lot of time doing one in class. I had told you to use the slide that illustrated a cost of goods sold budget as a job aid, and you'd also done a homework problem on this thing, so you had lots of practice with this thing. Those of you who made errors tended to make errors with the inventory. Okay, you have to consider both the beginning inventory and the ending inventory separately, and you have to consider the beginning and ending inventory of the raw materials, the beginning and ending inventory of work in process, and the beginning and ending inventory of cost of goods sold. You can't just consider all the beginning inventories, include those at the beginning, and then subtract out all the ending inventories at the end, because they have a different impact on the schedule here. So you had beginning and ending inventory for materials would be part of getting the cost of materials put into production. So there's your beginning inventory, there's your ending inventory. Then you had to add to the cost of goods in production, you had to add the labor cost and the overhead costs. So that gives us the total manufacturing costs incurred this period. Then you had to add that to the beginning work in process, and then you had to subtract out the ending work in process. Okay. And that would give us the cost of goods manufactured. So again, here you had to consider the work in process at the beginning and the work in process at the end. And then when you get to your final calculation of cost of goods sold, you got to consider the beginning inventory of finished goods and the beginning and ending inventory of finished goods. So your total there is 983,000. I think just about everyone who got it wrong, where you got it wrong, was in those areas I highlighted with the inventory. And one or two of you got it wrong because you just ran out of steam in doing this thing. So, you know, I can't explain why you ran out of steam. You had lots of practice with this thing. So if I say use something as a job aid, use it as a job aid. And if I go over a problem in class that is also the same problem you get in the homework, and I say there's a job aid, I would pay particular attention to those particular problems in the future. So I think we've already started chapter 9 now, so you've got a job aid for variances. So that's a heads up to you that variances are going to be a big part of the multiple choice and a big part of the take-home part of the next exam. And the last one here is you had to come up with the amount, what are the budgeted cash receipts for the month of April, okay? Now, quite a few of you got confused on the percentages to use here. So we collect 25% of the sales in the month. So in the month of April, we had sales of 250,000. We expect to collect 25% of that. So the actual sales in April that we're going to collect is 25% of 250,000. And we're also going to collect 75% of the month of the following the sales. So the sales for March were 225,000. You got to multiply that by 75%. So the total amount that we expect to collect is 231,250. Okay, I hope you found that review useful. I did notice when I did mention when I gave out the exams yesterday in class, and also when I posted that graphic for you, that people did better on the second exam by 10 points than they did on the first exam. So those of you who improved, I would say keep up the good work. Whatever you did differently, continue to do that differently. And then also those of you who didn't do so well, and if you didn't do so well in the second exam, you may not have done as well in the first exam. So assuming you want to pass the course, you're going to have to do something different, whether that's spending more time with the tutor, whether that's spending more time on the multiple choice practice, whether that's asking more questions in class. You know, you can still pull it out, but you're going to have to do something different than you've done on the first two exams. Okay, so I hope you found that review useful, and I will look forward to seeing you on tomorrow night. Be well, everybody. Bye-bye. We'll finish up chapter 9. I should say tomorrow afternoon. Be well, everybody. Bye-bye. Adios. Hasta luego. Au revoir.